Good afternoon. My name is George Evian. I am host actually for a podcast called Out from the Cube, and I'm also work for Polaris Solutions as an Agile coach. And today we're lucky to have with us Mike Green, and we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about Azure development, the importance of Azure, what it is in today's landscape of technology, and it is kind of Mike's wheelhouse and something that you're super passionate about, and we'll get into how you got into that a little bit. But I guess first, just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, and I guess where you work, even though I know you work for us at Polaris Solutions, but what you do with Polaris.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Green. I am the Cloud Practice Lead with Polaris Solutions. We've been focusing on helping clients find their place in the cloud, essentially. If they have workloads they want to move out there, they're trying to get stuff off-prem, they want to start fresh with something new in the cloud. That's kind of where I help focus.
Polaris roughly around the same time. I think you were a month or two ahead of me. But we both really started out and this was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we started out just really as kind of core developers, right? And just kind of writing .NET code for a variety of clients in the area in the Midwest. But you shifted your kind of focus to the cloud and to Azure and kind of those practices. And what pulled you that direction, and why the passion towards Azure and the cloud?
Yeah, so I've been, the cloud has been something I've been interested in for a while, just because it's different. It makes you think differently about how you're developing your solutions and deploying your solutions, and it gives you some new possibilities that you just don't have with on-prem, traditional solutions. Mm-hmm. So and it's just always evolving, and I'm a lifelong learner. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm just it kind of forces me to stay on the edge and continue to keep up.
So when I think of, and so our career paths definitely have taken different roads, even though we both kind of came in as developers, where I kind of do more agile and kind of team dynamics and alignment type things, which is my passion, and yours is, so I don't know Azure clearly at the depths that you do. But when I think of Azure and the cloud, I think of data, I think of storage, and I think of spinning up different environments so I can either deploy my solutions or have it out, public or internal or whatever it is. Is that kind of on a very high level what Azure is in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. It gives you a place to host your solutions in multiple different ways, but it also is, I like to think of it as more of an enabler. So it kind of gives you opportunities to do things that you can't do in an on-prem scenario. It enables you to be faster, it enables you to be more agile.
So, but when you talk about, when I think of Azure and I think about storage and environments, I guess the question I'm kind of trying to go down is that your background in terms of data and SQL and storage? Sure. And things of that nature?
So my background is application development. I've in the angle brackets and the curly braces. Right. I've kind of coming to the cloud is the cloud is multifaceted. There's kind of a space for every type of role. There's a space for developers. There's also a space for data intelligence. There's a space for just the infrastructure. And learning the cloud, I guess I've had to sort of expand my horizon and kind of just get out of the development bubble and start looking at all the other possibilities that it has to offer. No way do I claim to be an expert in all things that it has to offer. I definitely have my I guess my niche in the application development space, but it is definitely giving me new things to learn and new things to tackle.
Yeah, because I wondered who transitions to that space, and so I guess in my mind I was thinking that is the natural progression maybe for a DBA, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, anybody can find something out there. I would imagine that they enjoy doing or right. Want to excel in.
Yeah. So you said something interesting offline when we were kind of prepping for this that I never gave that much thought to. There's a difference between the cloud and Azure, right? Cloud is the umbrella that Azure kind of lives under. Is that right? So talk about what the difference between the cloud and what Azure is underneath that.
Yeah, so I mean, the cloud kind of in general is a place to basically someone else hosts your workloads, whether that it's your actual line of business applications living out there, or you're just renting software as a service, for instance. In general, it just means that you own less of the maintenance.
But Azure is, so in terms of cloud computing, we talked about this earlier last week. We talked about the different players in that space, right? So Microsoft has the Azure, and they have a big stranglehold on the market. I don't know if it's a big one. And then there's Amazon. Those are the two main players in kind of the cloud space, right?
Correct.
Who are and we talked about this again offline, but what are we talking about in terms of dollars for this? Like is this just kind of a niche thing that may come and go, and we'll see if it has any legs to it, or is this something that people are like this is where we're hanging our hat?
Yeah, I mean, both Microsoft and Amazon have seen billions of dollars in revenue a year in cloud technology, and it just continues to grow. It's been growing. So AWS obviously it's been around longer, and it's been growing every year. I don't think they've had a year where they've dipped. So the more and more organizations are moving their workloads to the cloud quicker and quicker every year.
So that is kind of the what, and we talked a little bit about, or you hit on a little bit about the why. So I was interested in just kind of the what of cloud and Azure. What else is under the cloud in terms of just the Microsoft stack? And you talked maybe there's 3 or 4 different pillars under cloud for Microsoft.
Yes.
What are they?
Yeah, so Microsoft Cloud is made up of Azure, which is the place where you host your workloads. Office 365, which are going to be it's mostly software as a service applications. You can have your Exchange and Office in the cloud and all that good stuff. And then Dynamics, which is their CRM offering. So Microsoft Cloud is made up of all 3 of those. So that sometimes you'll hear them refer to them as having 3 clouds.
3 different clouds. And do you happen to know? I'm putting you on the spot with some of this stuff, and if you don't know, it's fine. But in terms of the service or the revenue generated from those 3, is Azure does Azure crush the other ones?
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, I'd be interested
on
how much the cloud. I saw an image of this. I don't read it at the depths that you do, or study it at the depths that you and other people at our company do. But one image is stuck in my head, and you may have been the one to circulate it. There was a picture of a data center being submerged in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, off of California or something like that, and that for whatever reason that stuck me. Is that what, when we think of my data being in the cloud or whatever that is, and trying to visualize what it is, a data center, it could be a physical on land, but this one happened to be actually in the water. I don't know if you remember an image circulating about that they were putting these, the cloud services or whatever data centers in the water. But that is it, right? It's just it could be a warehouse, right?
Yeah, it's someone else is investing in having large amounts of compute power that we get to take advantage of, and it's playing on the economies of scale. So they've bought, they've invested lots of money into lots of compute power and lots of servers, so that we can rent little pieces of them and but get that capability to scale as we need to. So you may go in there with a small workload, but hopefully if things are going right, a few years down the road you need to scale it. The cloud gives you that space to do that because they bought, they've invested in just massive amounts of.
When I have messed around with Azure a little bit, and when I started with this maybe 5 or 6 or so years ago, there were only so many data centers, and you really kind of had to tie in where you wanted to host it, northeast or southwest, whatever it was, like different locations. Is it still laid out that way, or is because it's growing, are there more centers to kind of pick and choose from, or is it still kind of isolated to regions like that?
So there's still, when you're creating workloads, you're still choosing which region that your workloads are going to live in. So you have control over where geographically they are. So usually, especially if it's like internal workloads, you'll probably want to put them in a region that's close to you, just for latency's sake. But a number of regions are just continuously growing. They've got regions all around the world at this point.
So that is kind of the what, and so why is this? Why are people considering this, or why should they consider this? We kind of understand what it is and what cloud is. I kind of always thought that cloud and Azure were kind of hand in hand, but they're really, it's just an umbrella, the cloud is an umbrella over these things. But, so that is kind of the what. So why should people be interested in this? You know, why should a company, you know, have any interest in putting their data on the cloud if it's currently on-prem and things are going well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it's an enabler. It gives you opportunities to do things that you currently cannot do, quite frankly, with your on-prem infrastructure. There's a lot of people who, you know, think they're there, but you know, there's service offerings that the cloud gives you that you just simply don't have.
So let's not to cut you off. So I'm interested in that, and I have to ask this question because if I'm selling shoes and everything's on-prem, and I just need to know shoes and sizes and customer information and credit card and all that, and I've just got this streamlined, and I've got my jobs and a SQL, whatever it might be, right? And I've just got my data there. What else could I need? What else could I possibly need that as? So when you say that it's an enabler to other services, what are those services? What else could I possibly need?
Yeah, so let's step back and talk about the on-prem solution. So you have an on-prem solution now. At some point in time, you made an investment to buy all of the infrastructure that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you did capacity planning, you know, correctly, and you have the workloads that you have on-prem are keeping up with the size of your infrastructure and you know, and the speeds and everything. At some point in time, you know, again, if everything's going well, there's a chance that you're going to outgrow that, and you'll have to make a decision. You know, should I buy more infrastructure, or should we just start putting some of this stuff in the cloud? It's a little bit different decision, because when you're thinking about buying infrastructure, you have to do things like capacity planning, and you know, you're basically, you know, it's a capital expense. When you start looking at the cloud, you don't have to think as much about the capacity planning. You could just start small. You could scale up as you need, or scale back down if you need.
And that is how Microsoft sells it, isn't it? Or cloud in general. But
that's definitely a big part of it, is its elasticity to kind of meet the demands of your workloads without you having to overspend or potentially, hopefully, you know, not underspend on your infrastructure. And then there's other typical things to look at too with your on-prem infrastructure, like the total cost of ownership. So you're dealing with more than just hosting servers. It's someone's responsibility to make sure those don't go down.
Mm-hmm.
There's, you know, some statistics. I don't want to quote percentages because I don't know, but I know that there's a not insignificant amount of time that employees spend, quote, keeping the lights on.
Mm.
And they could be spending that time innovating and giving value back to the business, rather than just reinvesting time into their infrastructure. And that's another thing to think about when you're starting to move out to the cloud. There's a lot of keeping the lights on is handled for you in the cloud. So you can focus on adding the business value and not so much on just making sure that servers aren't going down.
Is it really as simple as flipping a switch? Like, hey, I need another server, or I need this amount of storage, or whatever it might be, right? Is it as easy as like spin this up, spin it down, and the cost fluctuates as I turn things on and off, correct? And as there's load. But is that as easy as it is? You just go into some sort of portal and say spin it up, and
pretty much. You know, but as I think, as you started to allude to a little bit, that can be scary for some organizations as well. But you know, they can be worried about anybody going to the cloud and spinning up 100 VMs or whatever and start charging up costs. So, I mean, it is easy, but you know, with that, it comes a lot of responsibility to make sure that it's well governed and secure. You know, that those controls don't come, you know, without some effort.
So I know we'll get into it later on in this hour, but I am interested in what you said about the security to this. So that has to be a major concern for everybody, right? We live in this day and age, and actually you and I did a workshop with a company here in town where we talked about security. We talked about this, you know, OWASP stuff and things, and how easy it is to get to people's data that don't have things locked down. So how do we know, or how does Microsoft go about kind of making sure people are understand that their stuff is secure and locked down and in this day and age.
So yeah, it's scary for anyone to think that their especially data is usually the big concern, that their data is living somewhere that they can't see and control
Mhm.
and touch. But I have some things to think about. I mean, like the data centers that Microsoft put together, they're the money that they're spending on security for those data centers, you know, I'm sure is going to outweigh most
Yeah.
on-prem data centers. There's physical security to where only certain people can enter certain rooms or even just get into data centers to begin with, down to the software security, and they're continuously keeping things up to date, monitoring for threats and adjusting. There's teams dedicated to it, right? And can't say that every organization has a team that's dedicated just to
Right.
that. They have no other responsibilities.
The data breaches that we see, the Netflix and the retail stores and the people that are getting credit cards and all that. When I think about that and hear those stories, for whatever reason, I think about like on-prem data breaches and all that. And I don't know how these other big companies where their data resides. Are there Azure break-ins? Like, have there been like in cloud-based data breaches, or are they typically on-prem?
So, I mean, regardless of where your applications are running, there's still security holes that can be. You can still have security holes that because developers didn't do things like protect against SQL injection or things along those lines. So just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean you're inherently more secure. That your application is inherently more secure. You still have to have the right security controls in place inside your applications. You still have to have the right security controls in place in terms of who can access, like if you have VMs running out there, who can access those VMs, and so there's still a large responsibility on the customer of the cloud to have those controls.
Do you have to code and develop it in a different manner than you would with an on-prem? So you're saying that you have to be intelligent about your security patches and things of that nature. Is that something that you have to code now for? Is that something as a development team that we have to be intelligent about how to use Azure?
Not so much just how to use Azure, but just how to do general security practices.
Okay.
So like we did that workshop on OWASP. That's still going to apply to the cloud.
Okay.
There are different different offerings that the cloud gives you. So that might have to make you think a little bit differently. But in terms of security, it's still your pretty basic things. There's keys to things that you want to have in configuration and lock down so people can't get to them.
So you're saying security practices would be across both platforms, on-prem and
from an
cloud,
application perspective, definitely.
regardless
I think
of what cloud practice.
from an infrastructure perspective, there's definitely going to be some differences to what you're doing now.
Good. Well, with part two, we're going to get into a little bit more about what we do, what Mike does actually, with our clients and the problems that we are looking to solve and that Mike solves with our clients. At the places, so now we kind of know the what and the why of what Azure is, but now we're going to really get into what we see actually out in the workforce and with businesses and the problems that we're able to solve by using cloud. This segment is brought to you by Polaris Solutions. Work smarter, move faster, and achieve more with Polaris Solutions. Find us online at PolarisSolutions.com.